the shape of silence. This is how it happens. Not with fire, not with prophecy, but with a knock at the door at the wrong hour. In the weeks since the past began to stir, the crew of the Morningstar had learned a difficult truth. Memory does not stay buried just because it was carefully hidden. Mercy has begun to remember what was taken from her. Lucian has begun to hear his sister again. And Evelyn, who has survived Eden, exile, and grief, has felt the old patterns tightening around the present. This morning, something arrives that cannot be ignored. Not a ghost, not a vision, but a living consequence. And once it crosses the threshold, silence will no longer be neutral. Dawn at the Krewe. Dawn washed gently over the French Quarter, soft rose and gold spilling across the wrought iron balconies. The city felt suspended between breaths, the way it often did before the heat and tourists arrived. Evelyn unlocked the Krewe's front door out of habit, wanting a moment of quiet before the day could ask anything of her. She paused when the building exhaled. It didn't sound. It was pressure. A shift in the air, as if something powerful had stepped onto sacred ground. The angel egg pulsed, faint gold from the back room. Evelyn frowned and opened the door. A man stood framed in the new morning light, tall, immaculate, expertly put together. Cassian. Not Cain the Wanderer, not a cursed drifter wearing centuries of dust. This man was sculpted, controlled, sleek. He wore a tailored charcoal jacket over a crisp white shirt. No tie, but polished enough that he didn't need one. His shoes were expensive, soft Italian leather, the kind that whispered status rather than flaunted it. His hair was tied back neatly, not long and unkempt, but intentionally styled. His posture held the confident, quiet authority of someone who dealt with CEOs, governments, and black hat hackers alike. A leather messenger bag, also expensive, hung from his shoulder, not patched or worn. Professional, minimalist, pristine. His eyes, though, they carried centuries.
Evelyn.
Not Eve, not Mother. He respected her chosen name. She searched his face for the frightened, furious boy she remembered. He wasn't there. He had refined himself into something elegant, successful, even enviable, but she could still sense the ache beneath the polish.
Cassian,
she said, her voice tighter than she intended. He managed a small, composed smile that didn't reach his eyes.
I know it's early. I didn't want to arrive at a busy hour.
You mean you didn't want witnesses?
A flicker of wry acknowledgement crossed his features.
Perhaps that too.
He stepped closer, shoes tapping lightly on old stone.
I didn't come here by accident. Lucifer owed me a favor, one I waited a very long time to call in.
Evelyn's expression didn't shift, but something cold tightened around her ribs.
What favor?
To stay,
he said.
A month, to work here, to help, to manage the crew. To prove I can be near my family without destroying everything.
The angel egg pulsed again, softening the air. Evelyn stepped back, only enough to keep distance, and Cassian crossed the threshold with the practiced ease of a man entering a high-stakes meeting. The crew of the Morningstar settled around him, curious and wary. And in the quiet dawn, the past walked through the door, wearing $1,000 shoes. The confession. Polished, successful Cassian finally speaks his truth. Cassian set his messenger bag on the antique counter with deliberate care, the gesture of a man accustomed to conference rooms, security briefs, and precision. His suit jacket moved smoothly, the faintest scent of expensive cologne drifting with him. Evelyn stayed several steps away, arms loose at her sides, but her shoulders rigid. He noticed. He always noticed.
I didn't come here to disrupt your life.
He began, voice steady as a practiced negotiator.
I didn't come seeking redemption. I just wanted to speak truths that I've held too long.
She didn't shift, didn't soften. The sunlight refracted through stained glass and caught in the strands of silver in her hair. Cassian inhaled.
When I killed Abel,
his voice caught, the only crack in his composure.
I wished it undone that same second.
Evelyn looked at him sharply, searching for manipulation. Cassian didn't move, didn't break eye contact. This was not a plea. It was a confession he'd needed to voice for millennia.
I wished it undone every day after.
He continued.
Through deserts and kingdoms and centuries of wandering. Every time I changed my name. Every time I learned a new city. Every time someone recoiled from me. Every time I opened my eyes.
His jaw clenched.
But wishing doesn't unmake anything. I know that.
Her eyes gleamed with something sharp and pained. And I am not Eve any more. The words were quiet, cruel only because they were true. Cassian swallowed.
Yes.
And I am not Eve any more. Her voice trembled on the name she had cast aside. I do not return to the woman I was just because you regret your past. He nodded, not flinching.
I'm not asking you to return,
he said softly.
I'm asking not to be shut out before I can prove I've changed.
The angel egg hummed again from the back room, as if reacting to the shape of their grief. Cassian straightened his cuffs, a subtle attempt to regain composure. He looked expensive, controlled, elegant, but in that moment he looked devastatingly human. Evelyn turned away before her expression could betray her, and Cassian stood there, wealthy, polished, and still carrying the oldest wound in the world, waiting in a silence he didn't dare break. Evelyn seeks mercy, but mercy is gone. Evelyn left the crew with her breath caught tight in her chest, the way it always did when the past rose too quickly, too sharply. She needed steadiness, Mercy's steadiness, and she needed it now before the tremor inside her grew into something harder to hide. The Mayorne wasn't far, 7, maybe 10 blocks from the quarter, depending on the crookedness of her path, or whether she cut through the quieter side streets. Evelyn chose the quieter streets. Morning slid gently across the rooftops, warming the bright colors of the Marigny cottages, turquoise doors, lavender shutters, wrought iron balconies that had seen better centuries. Musicians were still asleep, bars still shuttered, beads caught like forgotten confetti in the branches of live oaks. She passed a bakery, already smelling of butter and sugar, then turned down the little street where Mercy's small cottage nestled between a tattoo parlor and an old Creole home with a sagging balcony. Mercy's gate, white wood with peeling paint, was closed. Jasmine curled lazily over the arch. Evelyn pushed the gate open, wincing as it creaked loudly in the morning stillness. She knocked at the door, waited, knocked again.
Mercy!
She called softly. No answer. She tried the handle. It gave easily. Mercy trusted her wards more than any lock, and the wards hummed faintly as Evelyn stepped inside. The cottage smelled of rosemary, beeswax, sandalwood, and last night's rain. A shawl still hung over the back of a chair. A teacup set half full near the windowsill. A candle had burned itself down to a stub. Someone had left recently, but not in distress, just in purpose. The absence was the part that hurt. Evelyn rested her hand on the back of Mercy's chair, grounding herself in the familiar texture of worn wood. She breathed in, slow, steady, but it didn't help. Not the way Mercy's presence would have. She whispered into the emptiness.
I needed you.
Her voice trembled on the last word. Evelyn stepped back, closing the door softly so it wouldn't echo. The quarter felt heavier now. The Marigny felt colder. With no Mercy to hold the edges of her breaking apart, Evelyn turned toward the only other place in the city where she could fall apart without being seen. The river was waiting. Mercy arrives at Bellamy's swamp cabin. The world felt different the further Mercy drove from New Orleans. Less concrete, more root and mud and memory. The highway narrowed into 2-lane blacktop lined with cane fields, and then the cane gave way to cypress groves rising from still, dark water. Spanish moss hung in heavy curtains from the branches, muting the daylight to a dim, eerie hush. She rolled down the window. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of river mud, wild mint, and something older, something that remembered. Bellamy had chosen this place because the world forgot what lived out here. Magic slept in the dark water, in the roots of the cypress trees, in the hush between frog calls. And Mercy, who had always felt more at home in haunted suffocation than bright sunlight, understood the choice. She followed the narrow gravel road until it became nothing more than packed earth. Finally, she saw it, a small wooden cabin half hidden behind palmettos, leaning slightly as if the swamp had tried to swallow it for comfort. Mercy parked the car and stepped out, her boots sinking into wet earth with a soft thud. The yard was silent, except for the occasional croak of a bullfrog and the drip of swamp water from tangled branches. She approached the cabin slowly, aware of how the air thickened with every step. Bellamy's wards were still here, faint, frayed, dissolving with time but unmistakable. A whisper of lavender, a thin line of salt, barely visible. Patterns etched into the doorframe that had once thrummed with protective intent. Mercy touched the frame, her throat tightening.
Bellamy,
She whispered.
I'm here.
She pushed open the door. The inside of the cabin was a small, dim room, wrapped in gray-green light filtering through warped shutters. The air smelled of rosemary, river moss, and the sweet rot of old herbs left drying too long. Bellamy's presence lingered in everything. A chipped ceramic bowl filled with half-crushed herbs, a wooden cross at the foot of the bed, a child's toy carved from wood and worn soft at the edges, sitting abandoned by a chair, a thin quilt on the bed that had been mended a dozen times with mismatched thread. Mercy swallowed hard. Her gaze drifted to the hearth. A spiral burn marked the stone there, faint charred lines that formed a symbol Mercy knew all too well. The symbol for protection, for warding, for sacrifice. She knelt beside it, fingertips brushing the scorched stone. The residue of magic pulsed faintly, like the echo of a last heartbeat.
This was for her.
Mercy murmured.
For Lenore.
She rose and walked toward the small table by the window. On it lay Bellamy's ledger, its cover warped from humidity, its pages soft with wear. Mercy opened it gently, careful not to tear the delicate binding. Notes covered the margins in Bellamy's cramped handwriting. Herbs, charms, coded marks Mercy recognized as references to Lenore's nightmares, Lenore's laughter, Lenore's question. A sob clawed its way up Mercy's throat.
Where did they take you?
She whispered to the empty room. The swamp outside seemed to hold its breath. Mercy closed the ledger and pressed it to her chest. She had come for answers, and she would find them. Lucien walks in, cold. Lucien Devereux descended the stairs with a mug of coffee in his hand, and sleep still clinging to the edges of him. He'd assumed, when he heard movement downstairs, that Evelyn was rearranging teacups, or Mercy was lighting her morning incense. He reached the bottom step, turned the corner, and froze. There was a man behind the counter. Not a customer, not a tourist who'd wandered in early. A sharply dressed stranger. The man wore a tailored charcoal jacket, crisp white shirt, and dark trousers that fit too well to be off the rack. His long, dark hair was pulled back neatly, and his beard was groomed with the kind of precision Lucien associated with people who owned multiple mirrors and far too many opinions. His nose had a slight aristocratic hook to it, lending him an air of old-world nobility, someone who looked like he could negotiate with kings or overthrow them if he felt like it. He was adjusting the position of a lamp by millimeters. Lucien blinked. The stranger looked up.
Good morning,
he said, voice smooth and controlled. Lucien's brows lowered.
Who are you?
The stranger studied him for the briefest beat before answering.
Cassian.
Lucien nearly dropped his coffee.
As in Cain,
he said, voice cracking mid-word. Cassian's jaw tightened.
I go by Cassian now.
Lucien stared.
Where's Evelyn?
She left.
Cassian said evenly.
I didn't want to keep her cornered. She needed space.
Lucien set his mug down very slowly, like the room might explode if he moved too fast.
Right. Okay. So you let yourself in?
Cassian gave the smallest nod.
Evelyn let me in before she stepped out.
Lucian pitched the bridge of his nose.
That explains so little.
Cassian hesitated before adding,
Lucifer owed me a favor. He gave me permission to stay here for 1 month to help, to learn this place.
Lucian looked at him the way one might look at a knife left on a rocking boat.
Lucifer gave you managerial access to my shop.
Cassian offered a measured, reassuring sort of half-smile.
I'll try not to break anything.
Lucian opened his mouth to reply, but the front door jingled as Renard Blackwood stepped inside, hands in his pockets, hair charmingly chaotic.
Morning, boss.
Renard said, then noticed Cassian. He squinted.
Who's the model from the GQ catalog?
Cassian gave a courteous nod. Renard blinked back, realizing only belatedly who he was looking at.
That's Kane.
He turned to Lucian.
That's Kane, isn't it?
Cassian.
Cassian corrected gently. Renard mouthed the new name, then shrugged.
Well, you're tall.
Lucian cleared his throat and reached under the counter.
Renard, your timing is perfect. I need you to deliver something.
Renard groaned.
Why is that never good news?
Lucian produced a small, wrapped parcel. It shivered once, like something inside was offended. Renard recoiled.
Absolutely not.
You said that last time.
Lucian reminded him, placing the parcel firmly into Renard's hands.
Don't open it, don't name it. Don't let it charm you.
Everything charms me.
That's the problem.
Renard rolled his eyes, tucked the parcel into his satchel, and shot Cassian one more cautious glance before heading back out. The door shut. Silence returned. Lucian exhaled.
Right.
He said, rubbing his temples.
So, welcome to the crew.
Cassian inclined his head.
I meant it earlier. I'll do my best.
Lucian wasn't sure if that comforted him. Not even a little. Evelyn at the river. The Mississippi always felt older than her. Older than Eden. Older than any memory of dust or breath or the first time she'd woken into the world. The river carried centuries the way she carried scars. Quietly, insistently, unasked. Its restless surface shimmered under the thickening morning light as Evelyn approached, her steps slowing the closer she came to the water. She rarely came to Jackson Square this early. The tarot readers weren't yet setting up their tables. The artists hadn't unfolded their easels. The street musicians still slept somewhere behind shuttered windows. New Orleans felt strangely hollow without its noise and color. It suited her mood. Evelyn stood at the stone railing, overlooking the Riverwalk, and gripped the cool metal edge as though she needed the world to anchor her. A tugboat chugged by in the distance, pushing ripples across the muddy water. Seagulls circled in lazy arcs, calling to each other as if the day's business had begun without the city waking. Her hands shook. She exhaled hard, as though she could expel the conversation with Cassian from her lungs. Cassian, not Kane. Not the name that had defined their tragedy for thousands of years. He stood there in her shop, polished, composed, devastatingly human, and she had seen glimpses of the boy he had been before monsters and angels had carved their marks into him. But she could not hold that boy and the memory of Abel at the same time. The edges didn't meet. The wounds didn't align. Her voice broke when she whispered to the river, "Why now?" A tourist steamboat let out a long, sleepy horn far downriver. The breeze lifted the hair at her temples, cool despite the rising humidity. Cassian sang he wished the moment undone. It struck something deep in her chest, a place she had boarded up so long ago she'd thought the doorway sealed. Regret, she knew, was a cowardly kind of resurrection. It brought back the pain, but not the person. She pressed her palms flatter against the railing, feeling the grit of old metal against her skin. "There is no undoing," she murmured, as if the river needed the clarification. "There is only surviving what remains of us." A soft pulse of warmth stirred her memory, brushing the hair of young Abel beside another river in the old days when the world had been smaller and the divine felt nearer. But it was just memory, and Evelyn had grown weary of living in memory. Her throat tightened, and for a moment she thought she might cry, but the tears stayed buried where she'd trained them to stay. "Mercy, where are you?" she whispered. Her friend's absence stung harder than she expected. She needed someone to hold the raw edges of her heart until they stopped shaking. But Mercy was gone, and Lucien was back at the shop with a stranger who carried her past like a blade wrapped in velvet. She lifted her gaze to the slow-moving river, trying to breathe in time with its rhythm. One breath, another. The river didn't heal. It didn't forgive. But it listened, and sometimes listening was enough. Nothing has been resolved. Words have been spoken that cannot undo what came before them. The past has entered the room wearing a new name. Evelyn has stepped away before she can break, and the only person who might have steadied her is gone. The silence remains, but now it has weight, and it is waiting.